Yeah, it's a nothing burger because ultimately he doesn't want to say anything where he would contradict himself. And I think the writing is on the wall in terms of A.J. Brown being dealt. He's not going to start the season as a Philadelphia Eagle. He's going to be moved in the middle of the summer. What it comes down to is salary cap management. If the Philadelphia Eagles traded A.J. Brown before June 1st, they would have to contend with a $43.5 million dead cap hit, which negatively impacts their salary cap by $20 million. If they wait until after June 1st to trade him, it's a $16.5 million dead cap, and it actually helps them save $7 million. So I think that this is all about managing the cap. It's all about the math. A.J. Brown, moving on from him, they're going to do it later this summer when it's advantageous to them in terms of being able to maintain salary cap flexibility for the 2026 season. Because what we've always seen from Howie Roseman is that just because the season starts, it doesn't mean that the roster is complete. They've always found ways to add. You look at last year during the season, they traded for Jalen Phillips from Miami, edge pass rusher, who did a really good job for them down the stretch, applying pressure on their defensive side of the ball. So every single year, they make additions, they make tweaks to their roster throughout the course of the year. So they have to maintain that salary cap flexibility to keep all options on the table in terms of continuing to add to their roster.
And his tone has shifted a little bit. Now he still is steadfast in being very calm in this and not really giving us much to break down. But at the owners' meetings this week, he's saying, AJ's an Eagle, AJ's an Eagle. It's kind of Belichickian. He's just kind of giving you the same thing over and over. But in January, he said this about AJ Brown. This is Howie Roseman, GM of the Philadelphia Eagles. He said, quote, "It's hard to find great players in the NFL, and AJ is a great player. I think from my perspective, that's what we're going out and looking for when we go out here in free agency in the draft, just trying to find great players who love football, and he's that guy." So definitely a little more pointed in the fact that A.J. Brown is awesome. He loves football. These are the type of people that we bring in here. So that commentary, at least, you could interpret it as we don't know if we want to move on from him. Whereas what he said this week, it's like he's a member of the Eagles. That's all I'm going to say. I understand the interest. I understand everyone's talking about it, but he's a member of the Eagles. Didn't really wax as poetic as he did previously.
Yeah, he didn't. But here's the thing. I think it got to a situation where it was untenable for the Philadelphia Eagles to continue to move forward with A.J. Brown. Last year, having this guy openly questioning what's going on the offensive side of the ball, at the time, new offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo, and then, of course, Nick Sirianni with the buck stopping with him. I think that puts a lot of pressure on all the key actors within that franchise in order to try to keep it together, mend fences, and go out there and do their jobs. When you have somebody that's a malcontent, somebody that doesn't have confidence in the direction of the franchise after you just had success at the highest level of the sport, it makes it hard to believe that you can keep that person in the fold long term. And I think it got to a point last year with what we saw in Buffalo in the second half of that game where their passing offense was non-existent, in the first half of the game against the Tampa Bay Bucks where the passing offense was non-existent, in the second half of the game against the Rams where the first half against the Rams where the offense was non-existent. Like, there are too many instances you can point to with the pass offense or the offense in general not being very good, and we know that A.J. Brown is a focal point on that offense. You know, he's in the conversation for the best offensive player on that team. And he has been for the last half decade. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge for the Philadelphia Eagles to hang on to him, which is why I think Howie Roseman is taking the tack that he is and giving you the stock answer or coach speak or whatever you want to frame it as. He's not going to give you much. He's not going to show his hand. But I think everybody can see the writing on the wall that A.J. Brown won't be an Eagle this year.
Well, when you mentioned that A.J. Brown was very vocal about his frustrations with the offense, anytime he would say things, we would then say, well, what's going on with this head coach? Nick Sirianni. You would always say, isn't that a coach's job to make sure that stuff like that stays in-house?
Correct.
Well, Nick Sirianni was at the NFL owners meeting, and he, of course, was asked about A.J. Brown and his prospects of remaining an Eagle for this season. And here is what Nick Sirianni had to say.
Nothing's changed there. AJ's an Eagle. Nothing's changed from the last time I spoke to you guys. And, yeah, that's where we are. AJ's an Eagle. Nothing's changed since last time we talked through everything. But you're going through all the process that you go through each and every year. It's a little different this year because with a little bit of with the scheme change that we're making, you don't do as much of, hey, we're going to break down every single play that we ran last year, right? So it's just a little bit different of a process, but the process is, getting ourselves ready for OTAs, bringing the staff together, everybody learning the new pieces, the new job descriptions of what we need to do within it, and that's what we're focused on right now.
He didn't give us anything either.
No.
They clearly had their talking points.
But he did say this year is a little bit different.
Yep.
From the last few years. What that means to me is this is the first time we're actually entertaining trading an all-pro wide receiver and a guy that made our quarterback Jalen Hurts what he is today, which is a champion and a Super Bowl MVP. So I do think it's more likely than not that A.J. Brown on the move. Smalls, I think the biggest question is where's he going? I think who's the team that is an A.J. Brown away from being considered a favorite as a title contender. I mean, all the signs point to the New England Patriots. Sure. They were in the conversation to acquire A.J. Brown, earlier in the month. The L.A. Rams were also in that conversation. I don't know if that's still a thing because of them paying out the bonus to Devontae Adams, but I think that there are a lot of teams that feel like they are on the cusp of being able to break through, and they look at A.J. Brown as the missing piece. Hell, the Philadelphia Eagles once upon a time looked at A.J. Brown as the missing piece, which is why they traded for him. So
that's right.
I suspect that based on where the wide receiver market is, seeing what Jalen Waddle was traded to the Denver Broncos for, the Philadelphia Eagles have a template for what a return on an A.J. Brown deal would look like, and it's just a matter of who's willing to meet that asking price and when.
We talked about Nick Sirianni saying things are different this year. Sean Mannion coming in. He's going to implement a new scheme. A.J. Brown, we know, is incredibly productive. He's an excellent football player.
Yeah.
But if you remove him from the equation, do you think that Devontae Smith could be the primary receiver? Do you think that – how much do you think it would impact what the Eagles are trying to do if A.J. Brown is not a part of the equation?
Yeah, I think Devontae Smith is the number one wide receiver. Let me say this really quickly, though, because you just brought up something, and I think it's important to drill down on. They're bringing in a new offensive coordinator again.
That's right.
The Philadelphia Eagles have had a churn at the offensive coordinator position like nobody's business. I mean, this past year was...
Bears fans, here's the question that should have this whole city buzzing. What if the Bears do not need just another receiver? What if they need the receiver that changes how defenses feel the second Caleb Williams breaks the huddle? Ha ha! Because that is why the A.J. Brown idea is so dangerous. Not because it is done, not because it is official, not because Philly has announced anything like that, but because the fit is loud. The fit screams at you. Brown is still on the Eagles, yes, and both Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni are publicly holding that line. Fine, respect it, but when you watch the clip you sent and hear the cap explanation, and then you look at the bigger picture, you can absolutely see why Bears fans are dreaming. Philly already gave Brown a massive extension through 2029, so this is not some tiny contract. They also added Hollywood Brown this month, which does not prove AJ is gone, but it does mean they have added another veteran receiver while all this noise keeps swirling. And on the Chicago side, the Bears already said goodbye to DJ Moore in that Buffalo trade, and the current room is young, intriguing, and fun, with Rome Odunze, Luther Burden III, Khalif Raymond, and the rest. But there is still room for a true top-of-the-food chain target, the kind of guy who wins on slants, fades, deep overs, back shoulder throws, broken plays, red zone snaps, everything. Hoo-hoo, that is A.J. Brown, man. That is why his name hits different. And if I'm mapping out every possible road for Chicago, I see three. Road 1, the Eagles hold him and nothing happens. Fair, that is still the official reality today. Road 2, they get deeper into the offseason, look at the cap, look at the room, look at the noise, and decide a post-June 1 trade is finally worth it. If that happens, the Bears have to come in with future premium picks and a clear contract plan. Road 3, this thing lingers into training camp or the season. Frustration builds, and Chicago circles back later if Philadelphia ever softens. That happens in this league more than people think. Yeah, and what I love most is what this possibility says about the Bears. It says they are not thinking tiny anymore. It says they understand what a rookie quarterback window is. Caleb's contract is still manageable compared with superstar veteran money, and that is when you are supposed to swing if the right star becomes available. Not recklessly, not stupidly, but aggressively, smart aggressive. That is the sweet spot, and Brown would be worth real thought because he is still productive, still physical, still one of the league's most punishing receivers after the catch, and still the type of target who can make life easier on a young quarterback every single Sunday. So no, I'm not here to fake a trade and scream that it's happening tomorrow morning, but I am absolutely here to say this. If the Eagles ever decide the time is right, the Bears should be one of the first teams calling, because A.J. Brown in Chicago would not just upgrade the offense, it would change the identity of it. Now tell me what you think. Should Ryan Poles be ready to make that phone call if this turns real, or should the Bears trust Rome, Burden, and the young room to keep growing? Comment below, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and bear down, because the best teams in this league are never afraid to dream big and move bigger.